Since time immemorial, women have been the center of life, bearers of continuity and the soul of humanity. But what makes some women truly happy and self-confident, while others live trapped in fear, insecurity, and dissatisfaction? Sigmund Freud, one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century, offers us answers that go beyond superficial advice and quick solutions. For Freud, the secret of a fulfilled woman does not lie in external acceptance or the incessant search for validation, but in the inner journey, a journey towards self-knowledge and the integration of all parts of her being. In a society that has imposed rigid norms for centuries on how a woman should be and behave, true freedom is not found in blind rebellion, but in the deep understanding of who she truly is. From an early age, many women are taught to please, to be docile, to fit into predefined molds. They are told they must be kind, tender, that their value lies in what they can offer others. But what happens when that image becomes a prison? When the woman, in her attempt to be everything for everyone, forgets herself. Freud would call this a disconnection with the ego, a life lived according to the superego, inherited fears, and imposed expectations. But there is a way back, a path that is neither easy nor quick, but leads to true happiness and inner security. This path begins with an act of courage, confronting what has been repressed for years. Freud spoke of the unconscious as a vast ocean full of drives, symbols, and forces that influence us even when we are not aware of them. And within that unconscious, the woman finds aspects of herself that have been forgotten, rejected, or minimized. One of the most powerful concepts in Freudian psychology is that of libido, a life force that transcends the superficial idea of beauty or fragility and represents the authentic essence of the woman. It is the creative force, the ancestral wisdom, the connection with nature and with the mystery of life. But this energy has been silenced, hidden behind masks of compliance, unattainable perfection, guilt, and fear. For a woman to feel truly self-confident, she must find her inner libido, give it a voice, and allow it to express itself. Happy women are not those who have had an easy life. They are those who have learned to navigate darkness without getting lost in it, who have embraced their own repressed desires instead of fleeing from them. Freud said that repression is everything we reject about ourselves, what we fear showing to the world. And often, what a woman fears is not her weakness, but her power, her ability to be independent, to say no without guilt, to make decisions without fear of judgment. That's why self-knowledge is the key. It's not about following external rules, but about listening to the inner voice that has been silenced for years. For many women, this process begins with small acts of rebellion, putting themselves first, saying what they really think, taking a different path than what was expected of them. These are small steps, but each one strengthens the connection with their essence. The problem is that we live in a world that fears the self-confident woman because a woman who knows herself, who respects herself, and who doesn't seek external approval is a free woman. And freedom in its purest form frightens, because a free woman cannot be controlled or manipulated with empty promises or imposed fears. She knows who she is and what she deserves, and accepts nothing less. Freud spoke of the process of analysis as the path to uncovering repressed desires. For a woman, this process involves challenging inherited beliefs, fears transmitted from generation to generation. It means stopping being the good girl everyone expects and becoming the woman she truly is. It's not an easy path, but it's the only one that leads to real happiness. The woman who discovers herself begins to notice subtle changes in her way of seeing the world. What once seemed immovable now crumbles. Old beliefs reveal themselves as fragile structures built by others, not by her. And amid this transformation, something powerful happens. She begins to trust her own desires. Sigmund Freud had a profound fascination with the power of the unconscious, that part of the mind that operates beyond logic and reasoning. He said that the unconscious is not an enemy to be dominated, but an ocean of wisdom that, if learned to navigate, can guide us toward a more authentic life. For many women, the disconnection from their desires has been imposed since childhood. They have been taught to doubt their inner voice, to seek validation in others' reasoning, to fear their own impulses and desires. But the woman who learns to listen to her desires frees herself from that invisible prison. This awakening is not an act of meaningless rebellion, but a return to essence. It's like turning on a lamp in a dark room. Suddenly, everything that was hidden becomes visible. The lies they told themselves, the relationships they maintained out of fear of loneliness, the decisions they made to please others. Everything is exposed, and at that moment, the choice becomes inevitable. Continue in the shadow or walk toward the light of self-knowledge. Freud said that true growth only occurs when we face the truth of who we are, without masks or self-deception. But this requires courage. There is nothing more terrifying than looking at oneself in the mirror without filters, without excuses, and accepting what is truly seen. Many women, when they begin this path, feel fear of not being good enough, fear that the world will not accept them in their most authentic version, fear that in changing, they will lose what previously gave them security. But what they don't know is that, on the other side of that fear awaits a freedom they have never known. The happiest and most self-confident women are not so because life has made the path easy for them, but because they have learned to face uncertainty with confidence. They have stopped seeking security in the external and have begun to build it within themselves. They have learned to see challenges not as punishments but as opportunities to grow. And above all, they have understood that happiness is not something found on the outside, but something cultivated from within. Freud spoke of psychosexual development as a vital aspect of the psyche, an energy that inhabits all human beings and that in women is their connection to the depth of their being. A woman who connects with her sexuality becomes more aware of her own power. Her creativity flourishes, her capacity to love expands, her perception of the world enriches. But this process does not occur without resistance, because in a world that has feared female power, each woman who rediscovers herself becomes an act of silent revolution. Here is where another challenge arises: the environment. When a woman begins to transform, the people around her may react with discomfort, rejection, or even hostility, not because they wish to harm her, but because the change in someone they have always known in one way forces them to question themselves. Suddenly, the woman who never said no begins to set boundaries. The one who always sought approval stops needing it. The one who used to yield to external pressure begins to make decisions for herself. And this, for those who have built their own identity based on the submission of others, is deeply disturbing. But the woman who has found her center is not shaken by external resistance. She has learned to distinguish between genuine love and manipulation disguised as affection. She has learned that saying no doesn't make her selfish, but true to herself. She has understood that her value does not depend on how much she can give, but on how much she allows herself to receive. And at this point, something fascinating happens. Loneliness ceases to be a threat. Many women have grown up with the fear of being alone, believing that their value is measured by their ability to be chosen, loved, needed by others. But the woman who knows herself discovers that true companionship doesn't come from outside, but from within. She becomes her own best friend, her own guide, her own source of love. When Freud spoke of the process of analysis, he referred to this crucial point in a person's life, the moment when one stops living for others and begins to live from one's own truth. For a woman, this means leaving behind inherited guilt, implanted fears, others' expectations. It means allowing herself to be strong without feeling guilty about it, to be vulnerable without seeing it as a weakness, to be complete without needing someone else to complete her. This process doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey of continuous discovery, with moments of doubt and setbacks, with days of absolute clarity and others of confusion. But each step, however small, brings her closer to the woman she is meant to be. And in that journey, she realizes something powerful. She is not alone. Other women in different corners of the world are going through the same awakening. Here is where the importance of community emerges. Freud believed that the individual psyche did not exist in isolation but in connection with broader societal contexts. In other words, a woman's journey not only transforms her, but generates an effect on all those around her. When a woman liberates herself, she opens the door for others to do the same. When a woman dares to be authentic, she inspires others to do the same. That's why happiness and self-confidence are not individual achievements, but legacies. Each woman who allows herself to live her truth is healing not only her own history, but that of past generations who didn't have the opportunity to do so. She is leaving a clearer path for those who come after, and in that act, she finds a deeper purpose than any external validation. That of being, in her very existence, a manifestation of freedom. The woman who has found herself doesn't settle for merely existing. She wants to live fully. She doesn't accept a half-life, doesn't let herself be locked in the comfort of the known, nor does she allow the fear of the unknown to paralyze her. She is aware that life is a constant flow, a movement that pushes her to evolve, to discover herself in each stage, in each experience, in each emotion that passes through her. Freud spoke of the need to integrate all aspects of being, both the conscious and the unconscious. It's not enough to embrace what we like about ourselves. It's also necessary to face those parts that make us uncomfortable, that hurt us, that we have learned to hide for fear of rejection. The woman who dares to do this experiences a profound transformation. She stops fighting against herself and instead begins to understand herself. In this process, the woman discovers something essential: the power of her own voice. For centuries, female voices have been silenced, minimized, ignored. They have been taught to speak in whispers, not to disturb, not to question too much. But the woman who finds herself understands that her voice is her greatest tool, her way of marking her existence in the world. And once she begins to speak with authenticity, there is no turning back. This discovery brings with it a new way of relating to the world. She no longer seeks to fit into spaces where she is not valued, nor does she try to modify her essence to be accepted. She learns to surround herself with people who respect her, who inspire her, who push her to be better without demanding that she renounce herself. She distances herself from those who try to dim her light, from those who feel threatened by her growth. She understands that her energy is a valuable resource that must be protected. As she advances on her journey, the woman also realizes the importance of the body in her process of self-knowledge. Freud believed that the body and psyche were deeply connected, that repressed emotions, unresolved traumas, wounds from the past manifested in the body in ways that often went unnoticed. The woman who listens to herself learns to pay attention to her body, to recognize its signals, to understand that each tension, each ailment, each discomfort is a message that must be attended to. She begins to move in a different way, not from obligation, not from self-demand or punishment, but from the pleasure of inhabiting her own being. She discovers the beauty of walking unhurriedly, of breathing deeply, of stretching with gratitude, of dancing with freedom. She understands that her body is not an enemy to be disciplined, but a temple that deserves to be honored. And in that process, something changes. She begins to feel stronger, more alive, more connected to her essence. But this connection doesn't just occur on the physical plane. It also extends to the emotional world. The woman who finds herself stops repressing her emotions, stops being ashamed of her sensitivity, her intensity, her capacity to feel deeply. She understands that emotion is not a sign of weakness but an expression of her humanity. She learns to cry without guilt, to laugh without fear, to love without reserves, and above all, she learns to sustain herself in difficult moments without expecting someone else to rescue her. This is a crucial point in her journey because many women have grown up with the idea that they need to be saved, that their happiness depends on someone else, that true love is that which completes them. But the woman who knows herself breaks with that narrative. She doesn't seek a savior because she has learned to save herself. She doesn't expect someone to fill her voids because she has learned to embrace her own fullness. She doesn't beg for love because she has understood that the most important love is the one she gives to herself. And here is where her energy completely changes. The woman who loves herself emanates a different light, a presence that needs no words to be felt. She no longer seeks to be desired. She chooses herself. She no longer needs to be validated. She recognizes herself. She no longer fears being alone. She enjoys her own company. And it is in this state of authenticity that the most genuine connections begin to emerge. When Freud spoke of the dynamics of human relationships, he emphasized the idea that meaningful connections are based not on neurotic needs but on mutual respect and understanding. And the woman who has found herself begins to notice this dynamic in her life. Suddenly, she crosses paths with people who resonate with her energy, finds paths she had never considered, receives answers that previously seemed unattainable. Not because luck has changed, but because she has changed. And here, something happens that she often doesn't expect. Her presence begins to inspire others. Without realizing it, she becomes a living example of what it means to be free, of what it means to love oneself unconditionally, of what it means to live without fear of being oneself. And at that moment, she understands that her journey has not been just for her. That by transforming herself, she has opened a door for others to do the same. As this woman continues advancing on her path, she begins to notice how the dynamics around her begin to change. Conversations that used to interest her now seem empty. Relationships she maintained out of habit begin to feel heavy. Others' expectations that once defined her crumble one by one, like old chains that no longer have the strength to hold her. But this process, though liberating, also entails a mourning, because growing means saying goodbye to parts of ourselves that we once believed essential, to past versions that gave us identity, to spaces that gave us security. Freud spoke of fixations as those parts of the self that remain locked in past developmental stages, that are denied, that are repressed out of fear or shame. But the woman who is committed to her own awakening understands that she can no longer flee from her repressions. She must face them head-on, understand them, integrate them. And in this process, she discovers something powerful. Her repressed desires are not her enemies. They are not there to destroy her, but to show her what she has not yet healed, what she still fears facing. Often, these repressions manifest in the form of doubts, fears, insecurities that seem to resurface when least expected. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm not strong enough? What if this path takes me away from the people I love? But the woman who has learned to listen to herself is not paralyzed by these questions. Instead of fleeing from them, she examines them with patience, confronts them with honesty, gives them space to exist without allowing them to dominate her. And in that act, she reclaims her power. As she continues exploring her interior, she also discovers the importance of something that previously seemed insignificant: rest. In a world that rewards incessant productivity, that imposes the idea that a person's value is measured by how much they do, how much they give, how much they sacrifice, the woman who knows herself dares to challenge this mentality. She learns to stop without guilt, to listen to her body when it asks for a pause, to respect her rhythms without feeling less valuable for doing so. Because rest is not a luxury but a necessity. It is in stillness where answers arrive, where intuition strengthens, where creativity flourishes. And when the woman allows herself to rest without guilt, she realizes how much time she spent living for others, running aimlessly, exhausting herself to meet expectations that were never hers. But now everything is different. Now she understands that her well-being is her priority. This discovery leads her to another level of transformation: the reconstruction of her own identity. She no longer defines herself by the roles that society imposed on her, by the labels others assigned to her, by the beliefs she inherited without questioning. Now she allows herself to reinvent herself, gives herself permission to change her mind, to explore new passions, to abandon what no longer nourishes her. And in this process, she discovers a sensation she had never experienced with such intensity before: peace. But this peace is not an absence of conflict or a life free of problems. It is a peace born from the certainty that whatever happens, she will be able to sustain herself, that she doesn't need to prove anything to anyone, that she doesn't have to justify her existence, that she is not here to fit into others' molds. And that peace, that security, that firmness in her own essence is what makes her unbreakable. When Freud spoke of a healthy ego, he emphasized that the greatest achievement of a human being is not to adjust to what others expect of them, but to become who they truly are. And the woman who has come this far understands that this is her true purpose: to be herself in her totality, without disguises, without fear, without restrictions. As the woman immerses herself more deeply in her process of self-knowledge, she begins to notice an unexpected phenomenon: the discomfort of those around her. People who previously seemed to support her begin to show resistance, some with subtle comments, others with more direct attitudes. "You've changed a lot. You used to be more accessible. I don't understand why you're complicating yourself so much." And then she understands something she hadn't considered before. Her transformation doesn't just affect her, but also those who have known her in a certain way. This discovery generates a mix of emotions. On one hand, she feels freer than ever. On the other, she faces the fear of rejection, of loneliness, of the possibility of losing connections that were important in her life. But something inside her tells her she can't go back, that she can't fit back into the version of herself she has left behind. And here arises a crucial test in her path: learning to let go without feeling guilty. Letting go is an art. It doesn't mean forgetting, despising, or denying what was once significant. It means recognizing that some relationships, some dynamics, some versions of ourselves have a time and purpose, but are not always meant to accompany us forever. The woman who has learned to listen to herself knows that holding on to what no longer belongs to her will only make her heavier, more stagnant, more distant from her truth. So she lets go, not with anger, not with resentment, but with love, with gratitude for what was lived, with respect for her own growth. But in this process of letting go, something wonderful happens. New connections begin to appear. People who resonate with her energy, who see her in her essence without trying to change her, who accompany her without demanding that she diminish her light. And this proves something powerful to her: we are never truly alone. When we are faithful to ourselves, when we dare to be authentic, the universe connects us with those who are on the same frequency. This new circle of relationships feels different. There are no power games, no need for approval, no fear of being judged. There are deep conversations, genuine laughter, unconditional support. For the first time, the woman realizes what it means to be in spaces where she doesn't need to protect herself, where she can simply be. And this discovery reaffirms something that Freud always defended: authenticity is the path to true human connection. With this new energy, the woman begins to explore something that previously seemed unattainable: the pleasure of living without guilt. For so long, pleasure had been conditioned by external rules, by what was correct, by what was expected of her. She had learned to postpone it, to rationalize it, to minimize it. But now she allows herself to experience it in its totality. Not just physical pleasure, but the pleasure of the senses, the pleasure of creativity, the pleasure of freedom. She rediscovers the taste of reading unhurriedly, of walking without direction, of dancing without shame. She finds beauty in the simplest details: the aroma of coffee in the morning, the sun caressing her skin, the sound of wind through the trees. And she realizes something essential: happiness is not in the great moments of glory, but in the ability to enjoy the everyday with a present mind and an open heart. This new way of living also leads her to redefine her relationship with time. Before, time was her enemy, something she had to manage with precision, something that was never enough. There was always something to do, something to fulfill, someone to attend to. But now she begins to see time differently. Instead of measuring it in productivity, she measures it in fullness. She no longer feels the need to fill it with meaningless obligations. She prefers quality over quantity, meaning over rush. And with this change, her anxiety begins to fade away, because anxiety is not born from a lack of time, but from disconnection with the present. And the woman who has found herself understands that life is not a list of tasks to complete, but an experience to feel. So she breathes more slowly, walks more leisurely, observes more deeply. And in this new rhythm, she discovers a peace she hadn't known before. In this state of openness, the woman begins to perceive life with another gaze. What previously seemed routine now has a different meaning. The small decisions she used to make without thinking, like what clothes to wear, what words to use, which people to respond to, now become acts of consciousness. Everything acquires a purpose because she's no longer living on autopilot, but from a clear intention. This awakening leads her to question not only her own story, but also the narratives she has inherited. She wonders where her beliefs about love, about happiness, about success come from. She realizes that many of these ideas were not chosen by her, but imposed since her childhood, from her environment, from a society that defines women with invisible rules. Upon realizing this, She feels a mix of indignation and liberation. Indignation because she has lived tied to mandates that were never hers. Liberation because now that she sees them clearly, she has the power to decide which to keep and which to discard. It's a profound process because it involves challenging not only the external, but also her own internal conditioning. But she's ready. At this point, something curious happens. She no longer feels the need to justify herself. Before, she explained her decisions, tried to make others understand her path, sought the approval of those who couldn't really see her. But now she simply acts. She no longer wastes energy convincing anyone. She knows who she is, she knows what she wants, and that is enough. This internal change is reflected in her expression. Her gaze is different. Her posture conveys security. Her voice has a different weight, not because she's trying to prove something, but because there are no longer doubts in her. And this generates a powerful effect in her environment. Those who vibrate at her same frequency draw even closer. Those who feel threatened by her authenticity distance themselves. And she allows it without resistance because she has understood that she is not here to fit into all stories, but to write her own. But this process doesn't just affect her external world. It also affects her connection with her own being. The way she speaks to herself changes completely. Before, her mind was full of judgments, comparisons, impossible demands. Now her thoughts are kinder, more compassionate, more loving. Not because she has stopped striving, but because she has learned that self-love is not indulgence, but respect for her own existence. And with this self-love comes an unexpected revelation: the freedom to make mistakes. Before, fear of error paralyzed her. She feared failing, disappointing, not being up to par. But now she sees her mistakes as a natural part of the process. Instead of punishing herself, she learns. Instead of stopping, she moves forward. And this change transforms everything, because when fear of failure disappears, life fills with possibilities. So she begins to try new things, dares to explore talents she had never developed, to say yes to experiences she previously avoided, to allow herself surprise. Her life stops being predictable. It becomes an adventure. And in this adventure, the most exciting thing is not the destination but the journey itself. In this new stage of her life, the woman feels a lightness she had never experienced. It's not the absence of worries or the elimination of obstacles, but a different way of facing them. Before, each problem seemed like an unbreakable wall, a heavy burden on her shoulders. Now, instead, she perceives them as part of a natural flow. She doesn't fight against them. She observes them, understands them, finds alternative paths instead of getting stuck in frustration. With this new approach, she discovers something fundamental. Her energy is her most valuable resource. For too long, she spent it on unnecessary battles, meaningless discussions, worries that only existed in her mind. But now she chooses what to invest her strength in. She doesn't allow just any situation to drag her down, any person to unbalance her. Her peace is her priority, and she protects it firmly. This change also transforms her relationship with solitude. Before, she avoided it, feared it, filled it with distractions. Now she seeks it with intention. In silence, she finds answers. In calm, she rediscovers her essence. Solitude is no longer an emptiness that needs to be filled, but a sacred space where her soul expands. And in this connection with herself, she realizes something revealing. She has always had within her everything she sought outside: love, security, validation, strength. For years, she believed she had to obtain them from the exterior, that someone else had to give them to her. But now she understands that all of that is already within her, waiting to be recognized. This understanding changes the way she relates to the world. Her bonds stop being a necessity and become choices. She is no longer with someone because she fears being alone, but because she truly wants to share her path with that person. She no longer seeks approval because she knows her value doesn't depend on others' gaze. She no longer needs to prove anything because her existence itself is enough. But with this transformation also comes a new test: learning to sustain her light without fear. Because when a woman recognizes herself in all her greatness, the world can react in different ways. Some will admire her, others will reject her. Some will be inspired, others will feel threatened. And here is where she must decide. Diminish herself to please others, or shine without reserves. The woman who has traveled this path knows that her light is not arrogance, but authenticity. That her security is not pride, but self-love. That her happiness is not a challenge to others, but an invitation to those willing to walk alongside her without trying to dim her. And so she continues advancing, with each step firmer, with each day more connected to her truth. Her life is no longer a succession of repetitive days, but an experience full of purpose. Her voice no longer trembles. Her gaze no longer avoids the reflection in the mirror. Her heart no longer doubts its own beat, because now she knows who she is, and that changes everything. With each passing day, the woman feels how the reality she once knew crumbles to make way for a more authentic existence. It's not a sudden or violent change, but a subtle one, like water that patiently molds the rock until transforming it into something completely different. Her thoughts have become clearer, her emotions more balanced, her intuition sharper. Now she walks with a security that isn't born from the absence of fear, but from the ability to face it without retreating. In the past, any doubt would paralyze her. Any criticism would make her falter. Any mistake would fill her with shame. But now she understands that life is a continuous process of learning, that perfection is a trap, and that true power isn't in not failing, but in rising again and again. With this new clarity, she begins to notice things that previously went unnoticed. She realizes the energy of places, the authenticity of people, the hidden truth behind words. Her ability to perceive what isn't said has become sharper. She doesn't let herself be deceived by appearances. She doesn't let herself be trapped by illusions. She trusts her instinct like never before. And in this state of deep connection with herself, she rediscovers something she had left forgotten: the pleasure of creativity. At some point in her life, she convinced herself she had to be productive, efficient, useful, that dreaming was a waste of time, that playing was childish, that expressing herself without a concrete reason was unnecessary. But now she allows herself to create without fear, write without censorship, paint without judging herself, dance without worrying about how she's seen. She surrenders to the art of living without restrictions. Each day is an opportunity to explore new ways of being, new ways of feeling, new forms of expression. She's not afraid to change her mind, to try different paths, to let go of what no longer serves her. Rigidity has been left behind. Now she flows, adapts, reinvents herself without effort. And with this internal transformation, her external world also begins to change. Not because she desperately seeks it, but because her energy has become a magnet that attracts what truly resonates with her essence. Opportunities arrive without her chasing them. Doors open without her knocking on them. The right people appear without her having to look for them. But despite all this growth, there are still moments of doubt, of nostalgia for the version of herself she left behind. Sometimes she wonders if the path she has taken is the right one, if she's truly where she should be, if she has renounced things that perhaps she should have kept. And in those moments of uncertainty, instead of resisting, she allows herself to feel, because she has learned that she doesn't need to have all the answers, that it's not necessary to always be in control, that the beauty of life is in the mystery. And in that space of surrender, where she stops fighting against what she doesn't understand, she finds a peace that transcends words. And she continues forward, always forward.